All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Get ready, because we're headed into some serious, intriguing stories from hospitals and healthcare. We're talking about those moments that leave nurses, caregivers, and staff wondering, is there something more to what we see every day?
And these aren't your typical ghost stories, no, sir. We're talking about folks who work in these very grounded, very scientific environments, and they're the ones reporting these experiences that kind of make you question, reality.
Yeah, exactly. And today we're diving into a collection of these firsthand accounts that people have shared online.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, they are mind-boggling. We're not talking about haunted houses or anything like that. It's hospitals, places focused on, healing and science. It's that contrast that makes these stories so interesting. The ordinary bumping up against the extraordinary.
You hit the nail on the head. It's that juxtaposition that makes you stop and think. How can something so strange, so seemingly impossible happen in a place like that?
All right, so picture this. You're a nurse working the reception desk in a busy hospital ward.
New Zealand, to be exact. Just a normal day, right? Paperwork piling up, patients coming and going. And then this elderly woman just kind of appears.
Yeah, the nurse didn't even see her approach. She's just kind of there, looking a bit confused, like maybe she's lost or something. But then she says she's there to see a patient, claims to be his mother.
So the nurse checks her in, standard procedure, points her in the right direction. The woman heads down the hallway. No big deal, right?
Right. Seems pretty routine.
Yep.
Until about 45 minutes later.
Uh-oh. What happened?
Two men arrive asking for the same patient. They introduce themselves as the patient's brothers. And the nurse, trying to be helpful, mentions that their mother's already with him.
Oh, I see where this is going. Not their mom.
You got it. The brothers, they exchange this look like, what's she talking about? And one of them says, our mother died 2 years ago. Now, the nurse is obviously shocked, right? So to be sure, one of the brothers pulls out a photo of his mom and asks if that's the woman she saw.
And it is. Same woman. The brothers, they're shaken. They go to their brother's room, and then, one of them rushes back, shouting for a doctor.
Oh no, don't tell me.
Their brother, the patient, had just died. And here's the thing, he was admitted for back problems. Nothing life-threatening.
So not only does this woman look exactly like their deceased mother, but then the patient dies unexpectedly right after. And what about the woman?
That's the other part. No one saw her leave the ward. She just disappeared.
Okay, hold on. My head's spinning. Was this like a case of mistaken identity? A memory glitch? Or could it be, something else? A final visit, maybe? I mean, it happening in a hospital, a place where life and death are so present. That just adds another layer,
Yeah, you're right. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What do we really understand about, consciousness?
Yeah.
About what's real and what's not? I mean, is it possible that our minds, especially when we're dealing with intense emotions, grief or stress, that we see things that aren't really there?
That's a good point. Hospitals are supposed to be all about science and reason, but these stories suggest there might be more to the human experience that we can explain.
And speaking of experiences that blur those lines, let's hop over to Spain. This next one takes place in a children's ward. And here's the catch. It's divided into 2 sections to prevent infections from spreading. So these kids, they can't interact.
So there's no way they could be influencing each other.
Right, exactly. But get this, there's something connecting them, something pretty strange. Their drawings.
Okay, I'm intrigued but slightly scared. What were they drawing?
Well, that's the thing. Nurses started noticing that many of the kids from both wards were drawing pictures of the same boy.
Okay, that's a little creepy. But kids draw all sorts of things, right?
True, but it gets weirder. Not only were they drawing the same boy, but they were all drawing him wearing the same clothes. Blue pants and a blue and white striped sweater. Very specific.
Okay, now that's hard to ignore. If it were just 1 or 2 kids, maybe it's a coincidence. But multiple kids who haven't even seen each other, drawing the same figure with the same details. There's something more to it.
Right. And then you hear what the kids were saying about this boy.
Oh, I don't know if I want to know, but tell me. What were they saying?
All of them. They said his name was Enrico. And that he visited them at night, asking how they were feeling.
Oh, wow. The matching clothes were weird enough, but now they're all saying his name and that he visits them. It's like they're all sharing some kind of, collective experience, even though they're separated.
Yeah, it really makes you think about what we don't understand about, shared realities and all that. And then one of the nurses, she gets curious and decides to look through the hospital records. Guess what she finds?
Don't tell me.
The file of a young boy named Enrico who died in that very hospital years earlier.
No way. This is not just a coincidence, right?
Yeah.
You have to wonder if those kids were sensing something, some kind of energy or presence.
It's definitely a fascinating thought. Kids, they're often more open to things that as adults we just brush off. Maybe they're more tuned in to, I don't know, certain energies or frequencies that we've learned to ignore.
Interesting. We always say kids have vivid imaginations, but maybe there's more to it. Maybe they're picking up on something real.
It's a possibility. And these stories, they make us rethink what we think is possible. They remind us that there's still so much out there that we can't explain.
Yeah, we like to think we have it all figured out, but clearly there are still mysteries to uncover.
Absolutely. And sometimes those mysteries are right under our noses, in the places we least expect. Like, for instance, a battlefield. Let's talk about a story from World War I. All right, so imagine this. World War I. You're a nurse in a field hospital. Chaos everywhere, right? You're surrounded by suffering, by death. It's gotta be incredibly stressful.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Sights, sounds, a constant flow of wounded soldiers. Your senses would be on overdrive.
Exactly. And in that kind of high-pressure situation, you'd think it'd be easy to, misinterpret things, see things that aren't really there.
Yeah, you'd think stress and lack of sleep would play tricks on your mind.
And that's a pretty common thought. People think these kinds of experiences are just, stress, exhaustion, overactive imagination. But a lot of these stories come from people who are trained observers, people used to dealing with intense situations.
Okay, that makes sense. So in this story, the nurse is tending to this young soldier. Multiple gunshot wounds, he's in bad shape. And despite her best efforts, he dies in her arms.
Yeah, it's a powerful moment, the fragility of life right there on the front lines. She steps out of the tent for a minute, just to compose herself. But when she comes back...
What? What happened?
The soldier's body is gone.
Gone? Like, what do you mean, gone?
Vanished. Poof. All that's left is his uniform, folded on the cot, and 3 bullets. The nurse, she was convinced he'd been, well, what some call raptured, like taken straight to heaven, body and soul.
Taken. Like supernaturally transported. That's a pretty big leap.
It is, and it comes from a certain religious viewpoint, of course. But even if you set aside the theological stuff, the mystery remains. How did his body disappear?
That's what gets me. Where could he have gone? Did someone move the body? Was it a mistake? Or is there something else at play here? Something we just don't understand?
And that's what makes these stories so interesting. They make you face the limits of what we know, right? And they force you to consider things that might seem crazy at first.
It reminds you that we don't have all the answers, that there are still things out there that science can't explain. And maybe that's a good thing. Keeps us curious, right? Keeps us searching.
Absolutely. So let's move from the battlefield to something a little calmer. This one's from a nursing home, and it involves a 92-year-old woman who, well, she had a habit that caused a bit of a stir.
Okay, let me guess. Sneaking out for late-night bingo. Starting a resident rock band.
Not quite. This woman, she loved to smoke, even though her doctor told her to quit.
Yeah, I can see how that would cause some tension. But I gotta say, at 92, maybe she'd earned the right to bend the rules a bit.
Well, the staff was worried about her health, of course. One nurse tried to talk to her, remind her about the doctor's orders. But the woman basically said, look, I'm 92. A little smoke's not going to hurt at this point.
I kind of admire her spunk. If you're 92 and still smoking, you're doing something right.
Yeah, well, another nurse, maybe a little more by the book, decided to confiscate her cigarettes. Led to a pretty big argument.
Ooh, I bet. Tough situation all around. I mean, you got to follow the rules, right? But at the same time, who are we to deny someone a little comfort, especially at that age?
It's a tough call for sure, and sadly, the woman passed away later that night.
Oh, that's sad. Makes you wonder if the stress of the argument played a role.
Yeah, maybe. But here's where it gets weird. Later that night, a different nurse is alone in the break room. And suddenly, objects start flying around, like something's throwing them.
Whoa, poltergeist activity in the break room. Okay, that's more than a little spooky.
And then, to make it even stranger, the room fills with this strong smell of cigarette smoke.
Oh, come on. Really? Like she's saying, you can take my cigarettes, but you can't take away my smoke break.
Yeah, some people call it a lingering energy imprint. The idea that our thoughts, our emotions, our habits, they can leave a trace on the environment, especially in places where we've had, strong feelings.
So, not a ghost exactly, but like an echo of their energy.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. But what about a, normal explanation? Could it have been a prank? Or a draft carrying the smell of smoke from somewhere else?
Those are good questions. We got to consider all the possibilities. But you think someone would have confessed by now if it were a prank, right? And the flying objects with the smell of smoke, that's pretty specific.
Right. That's what I love about these stories. We're left with these questions. We can try to explain them, but we may never know the truth.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces. We can gather the clues, try to make sense of it all, but in the end, we're left to draw our own conclusions.
And that's part of the fun, isn't it? Makes you think about the unknown, about the things that are still out there, beyond our understanding.
Exactly. It makes you question your assumptions. It opens your mind to the possibility that there's more to the universe than we think.
Well, let's shift gears a bit. This next story is a bit more heartwarming, but still full of mystery. It takes place in England and involves a young girl whose father, sadly, passes away during surgery.
Heavy stuff. You've got the wife outside the hospital room grieving, and their little girl, totally unaware of what's happened, playing inside with her toys. Heartbreaking.
It really makes you think. These stories are so powerful, so, I don't know, thought-provoking. But they also make you wonder, are these just isolated incidents? Or is there something bigger going on here?
That's a question a lot of researchers have been asking, and you might be surprised to learn there's actually quite a bit of data on this.
Really? I wouldn't think hospitals would be so keen on sharing these kinds of stories? Seems like the kind of thing they'd want to keep quiet.
You'd think so, right? But there have been some pretty big studies, surveys done in hospitals and healthcare settings all over the world, looking specifically at these unusual experiences.
So it's not just like anecdotal stuff. People are actually researching this.
Oh, yeah. They're trying to figure out how common these experiences are, what might be causing them, are there any patterns?
And what have they found?
Well, one study I found really interesting, they sent surveys to healthcare workers in a bunch of different countries, asking if they'd ever experienced anything paranormal while working.
Okay, I'm really curious now. What did they say?
A whopping 55% of them said they had experienced at least one paranormal event.
55%. That's over half. You can't just dismiss that.
Yeah.
It really makes you think there's more to reality than we realize.
Right. And it's not just limited to one culture or belief system. It seems like it's a universal thing. Like there's this other layer of reality that we're not always aware of. And sometimes, under certain conditions, we get these little glimpses.
But what is it? Are we talking about ghosts, spirits, something else entirely?
That's the big question, isn't it? And honestly, there's no easy answer. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about. Well, everything. Consciousness, life, death. It really suggests that our current scientific models might be missing something.
Like we're standing at the edge of this vast unknown territory. And these stories, they're like messages in a bottle, washing up on shore. Hints of what might be out there.
I like that. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not about finding all the answers. Maybe it's about embracing the mystery, about realizing there are forces at work that we may never fully understand.
So we've traveled from a busy hospital ward in New Zealand to a children's ward in Spain, from a battlefield in France to a quiet nursing home. And each story has given us a peek into the extraordinary, those moments where the ordinary bumps into something, well, inexplicable.
And while we might not ever have all the answers, these stories remind us that there's definitely more to life than meets the eye. Maybe the biggest takeaway is to, approach the world with a sense of wonder. Stay curious. Be open to the possibility that amazing things can happen, even in the most ordinary places.
So, next time you're in a hospital, take a moment to really listen. Look around. Pay attention. You never know what you might experience, what mysteries you might uncover. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. The universe is full of wonders just waiting to be discovered.